Okay, welcome to your solutions and acids and bases review. You're going to want to have your study guide out in front of you as well as the note sheet so you can follow along and fill in. We're going to be going over what makes a solution, solubility factors, acids and bases, and then the pH scale. So hopefully this will clear up any questions you have about the content, and then you'll be prepared for your upcoming test. First, we have solutions, and basically a solution just means that substances are dissolved into one another. So you're going to have two different substances, and they basically can make something new, and you can't tell the difference between the two of them. So examples of that would be salt water, Kool-Aid, you can have coffee and sugar, kind of usually any type of main liquid that you can think of where something's being put in another, you're going to have a solution with it. Understanding a solution, you have solvent and solute. So a solvent is what actually does the dissolving, and a solute is what's being dissolved. So if we were to take a look at our example, salt water and Kool-Aid, the solvent is going to be the water, and the solute would be the salt. Okay, so the salt's actually what's physically going into the water and it's being dissolved. If you look at the Kool-Aid example, our solvent is still going to be water, and the solute this time would be the Kool-Aid packets. So typically water is kind of known as your universal solvent. A lot of things can be dissolved in it. Other examples you can think of are what I mentioned before, the coffee and the sugar, pretty much any of like those mixed powders that you can put in your water, things like that. All of that would be examples of solutions. So solvent is what does the dissolving, solute is what actually is being dissolved. Now, if something can't dissolve, it's called insoluble. And what that just means is that the solute cannot actually be dissolved in the solvent. So a common example, and you can take a look at that picture over there, would be oil and water. Notice that the oil is just sitting on top of the water. Nothing gets dissolved. Nothing is kind of mixed in. You can distinctly tell that oil's sitting up on top right here and the water sitting below on the bottom. So there's still nothing that's created a new solution. Factors that can affect solubility. So solubility is kind of the rate at which a solute can dissolve in a solvent. So three main ones that I want you to focus on for your test would be temperature, saturation, and the solutes itself. The first one we want to talk about is temperature. So if you remember the lab we did where we were boiling the water and then also you were trying to use the ice to bring the water down for the test tubes, that was looking at temperature of solubility. So we used potassium nitrate, which is, hopefully you remember the formula, KNO3. And you should have noticed that as the temperature increased, we were able to dissolve more potassium nitrate. When the temperature decreased, you were not able to dissolve as much. So what you want to remember too for your test is the graph that you made. You had that the temperature would be here on the bottom on your x-axis, and the amount of the KNO3 would be on your y-axis. And we could say that here that as the temperature is increasing, so is the amount of potassium nitrate. So you kind of have that incline going up. Another factor we have is the saturation lab. So if you remember with the Alka-Seltzer lab, you first had the Alka-Seltzer just being placed in water. Then you had the Alka-Seltzer that was dissolved in salt water. Now the big question was which one would be able to dissolve faster. And the Alka-Seltzer in the regular water dissolved faster than the Alka-Seltzer with the salts in it because there already was a solute in that solvent. So it's almost saturation, you're adding more of the solute to it. So the Alka-Seltzer is almost kind of like battling with the salt that's already in there. So saturation of a solution also affects the rate of solubility. Last one is just the actual solutes itself. So when we were doing the potassium nitrate experiment, salt dissolved a lot differently than potassium nitrate. You just had a different amount of salt that were needed. It was the same idea that as the temperature increases, you're able to dissolve more salt. You just needed less of it. So make sure you look over those data tables again just to kind of familiarize yourself. Temperature increases, the amount of a solute also increases. Temperature decreases, the amount of the solute needed also decreases. So if we're looking at acids, now moving on to kind of a different part of chemistry, acids, some of the main characteristics that you want to know are that blue litmus paper turns red in the presence of an acid. So remember working with those. Blue to red means it's an acid. But then remember too is hydrogen ions are present, and those have a positive charge. So remember, you're always dealing with water molecules. So you have your oxygen and your two hydrogens. Okay, and remember, water molecules are never just one. Okay, there's always going to be another one. They always kind of act together. That's the whole idea of cohesion, and that water molecules aren't by themselves. So say I have two water molecules, negative charge on the oxygens, positive charge on the hydrogens. Okay, water is known as a polar molecule. So what's going to happen is that this hydrogen atom is going to be pulled towards this water molecule. What you're then going to end up having is one oxygen, still going to have that negative charge, and 3 hydrogen now. What that then becomes known as is hydronium, or H3O. Okay? So basically, the more hydrogen atoms there are, the more acidic a solution is. Okay? Other characteristics of acids, they have that sour taste, they can conduct electricity. The big thing is the blue litmus paper red, and you're having hydrogen. You're always going to have hydrogen present in formulas for acids. So if you take a look over here, hydrofluoric acid, hydrochloric acid, nitric acid, all of those have hydrogen present. Hydrochloric acid is kind of one you want to remember because that's the one that's in your stomach. Okay? The other side of bases, and bases are the opposite of acids, so they turn red litmus paper blue, opposite of acids. So going back to our water molecule here, go back to the water molecules that we had. So say this is the one where the hydrogen atom was removed, you're left with this now, OH, and it's going to have an overall negative charge to it. Bases typically have bitter taste to it, they can conduct electric currents, but their big thing is that their formulas are all going to have hydroxide in it. So if you're looking at these examples, you have potassium hydroxide, sodium hydroxide, lithium hydroxide. Okay. Putting together the acids and bases, you're going to have neutralization. And basically, you're going to have, if you want to kind of draw out these beakers on your sheet. So say you have 2 beakers, and these are all filled with hydrogen ions. Okay. On this side, these are all filled with hydroxide ions. All right, you are going to make the assumption that over here would be an acid and over here would be a base. Okay. If these two solutions were to mix together, you're going to have neutralization, because what's going to happen is, kind of draw a little arrow over here, these 4 hydrogen ions are going to then join with the hydroxide ions. And what you're going to have inside, if you were then to have a third beaker, is you're going to have H2O for each one of those. So I drew 4 there. Each one of those would match up. So you have to have the right amount of acidic hydrogen ions bonding with the hydroxide ions. So notice now that there's no charge. Typically you get salts and water that's produced. And remember, another way to write water is HOH. Okay, so acids have the hydrogen presence, bases have the hydroxide present, and if you combine them together, you're going to have neutralization. So they will have no charge anymore and produce some form of salt and water. Looking at the pH scale. So on your left side, you should have a picture of the pH scale kind of running down. It just has color, and I realize that, but down here, you would be dealing with gastric acid. That would be about a 1, moving up 2, and so on. Distilled water would be at 7. Okay, so 7 is neutral. Always anything that's below 7, you're going to have more hydrogen ions. So if you were looking at the pH scale, you would say that orange juice has more hydrogen ions than black coffee. Okay, black coffee is higher up on the pH scale than orange juice. More hydrogen ions are present in orange juice. Anything above 7 is going to have less hydrogen ions. So as you're moving up the scale, you're basically losing hydrogen ions and you're moving with that hydroxide ions. All right, other indicators for pH include litmus paper, the cabbage juice that we use, so kind of remembering that it changes colors based on whether a solution is acidic or basic. So you kind of want to know different ones that we use. So in class, we looked at baking soda, we looked at the tomato juice, the orange juice, the lemon juice. Other ones we looked at were ammonia, that's pretty high in terms of pH. You want to think about kind of your citric acids that we tested, and then a lot of our cleaning solutions are all going to be kind of right around here with the 7. They're going to be just about neutral, moving up into a more basic solution, okay? Cleaning products, typically most of the time, you're adding to like an acidic setting, okay? So hopefully this helped you kind of just review over the labs we went over, solutions, acid bases, and you should be ready for your test.